I'm going to be talking about theory because one of the things that I was really interested in having in this conference is the relationship of philosophy and theory and practice, how these three things interrelate. And they're related in very complex ways. Each is larger than the other two. But as I began to think about theory, I found that there were many people that had very strong feelings about theory. This talk is particularly for three groups. For the group of people, and you know who you are, who are absolutely fed up with the shackles of theory, dead theory that bosses you around and tells you what to do and confines you, and you want to work theory-free. Forget all this theory. This talk is for you. And the second group, for those who idealize theory and submit to theory and feel like theory is going to give you the right answers to what you do in your work. I've had many supervisees who get stuck with a client, and they go home and stay up all night looking through their books, trying to find out what's the right answer, what's the right interpretation that's going to crack this case. So this talk is for you. And then this talk is particularly for those of you who don't fit into either of these groups. I'm talking about the life of theory in psychotherapy, and I want to emphasize living theory. And I'm going to tell you the punchline of the whole talk. You don't have to sit through my whole talk to hear my conclusion. I'm going to talk to you about living theory and dead theory and the differences. And at the very end, I'm going to come to the conclusion that it isn't about the theory mostly. It's about the use of theory that makes the difference between living theory and dead theory. So my conclusion is going to be that I'm telling you ahead of time that almost any live theory can be deadened and almost any dead theory can be enlivened. It depends on really your way of using the theory, and so that is what I'd like to sort of explore with you. I'm somebody that loves theory. I love to take it in deeply. I love to see how it applies to my life and to each person that I'm working with. I love to grapple with it. I love to argue with it. I love to applaud it. I love to celebrate it. I love to denounce it. I have this very passionate relationship with theory. And I think that it started actually when I was a child, and I would sneak off and hide, sort of hide. My mother was very disapproving of this, so I would sort of hide in my father's old jalopy, and I would read the stories of the Bible. I loved stories, and I loved stories that gave me a sense of the larger picture of how things work and what was the nature of life. And so I loved the Bible stories, and my mother was very disapproving of that direction that my passions were going in. But when I would read these stories, I would think about, well, what does this really mean for my life? And if this is true, what does that mean about the nature of the universe? And I would think, what is it saying to me right now? And what would I say back about this? And how could I say this in my own words? And this very natural response that I had as a child to these stories is what I would think of as the experiential use of theory. I know so many people who were so oppressed by religion and Bible Bible teachings. And somehow I wasn't. I think maybe because my mother disapproved of it, I had to find my own way rather than being forced into it. But it's this taking in and chewing on and dialoguing with and allowing it to be alive inside of me, and then it becoming part of the whole thickness of my response to my client and my resonance. Notice when I use the word thickness of the response, and Jean used that word today a couple of times, and I think of that as Jean's word. And I sort of noticed it, thickness. Well, nobody uses thickness that way. But I knew exactly what he meant by thickness. And so now when I say it adds theory, adds to the thickness and resonance of my responses to my clients. How many of you know what I mean by that? You know what I mean because of how that carries his whole way with that, and then my way with that, and that word thickness then becomes part of a term, becomes part of a theory in a sense. It becomes part of a larger thing. And you know what I mean. And so as we go along, we'll be talking about that. I liked what you said, Rob, about in philosophy, the concepts being part of the felt sense, and then the felt sense opening up to new concepts. It's that kind of dialogue that in Jean's philosophy is talked about as the zigzag of going from something that we can talk about and think to something that is larger than that we feel and sense. And then that, again, is referred to something or turned into something that we can think and say. And it sort of goes like this. It keeps going and opening out. Theory counts. Theory is something that we are born into, that we are embedded in, our language, our culture. Trouble hearing? Oh, okay. I'm gonna forget here to embrace this microphone. How's that? The closer the better. I have to really embrace this microphone. I don't really know if I want to be as intimate with this microphone as I have to be, but I'll try. What was I saying here? I was saying that theory counts. Theory counts because we are born into many layers of story and narrative and ideas and constructs that we take for granted, that are part of what I'm calling theory. And we can't escape theory. We can't really work without, or think, or do anything without the stories and ideas and constructs and concepts that we both experience and help to form us, and then we help to form them. I don't believe that I could work therapeutically, or any of us could, without theory, and theory in this broad context. But I have been talking to a lot of really good therapists that that work without theory in the narrower sense of the particular theories that are part of our contemporary psychological scene. To me, those theories are very helpful and important, and they aren't some dead thing in a book. They're something that's alive and growing and moving and dynamic, not only because from generation to generation we evolve ideas and narratives about how life works, but also because they are alive and changing in me, as the way Rob was talking about it, that the theory opens up my sense of the moment and the experience and the client and myself, and then that also changes the theory and broadens the theory and develops the theory, and there's that relationship. Just to make a little bit more about what I mean by theory, I think that theory and philosophy and practice, my understanding of these are that they're levels of abstraction. So to give you an example, the idea of implicit that Jean talks about is on a philosophical level. The idea that there is no is. Is always is and implies. And implicit is a being and becoming more. It's always occurring and implying. That's philosophy. Then there's a theoretical statement that is one of my very favorite theoretical statements of Jean's, which is that every bit of human experience has an implicit forward movement inherent in it. Let me say that again. Every bit of human experience has an implicit forward movement inherent in it. That is so helpful to me. And it's so, what did you say, Rob, about every theory is a good theory is practical?
There's nothing as practical as a good theory.
There's nothing as practical as a good theory, yes, yes. To me, that every bit of human experience has an implicit forward movement inherent in it is very practical, because I can look at anything that may seem like a dead end, or it may seem despairing, or it may seem awful to me, like somebody wanting to give up on life, or somebody wanting to somebody being caught in a terrible, rageful stuckness. And if I say, well, what is the forward movement inherent in this bit of human experience? It changes that for me. And then that, for me, implies a kind of practice of opening up the experience of the moment to see what the forward movement that's inherent in it might be. And we saw that wonderfully in the demonstration this morning, the sense of opening something up and this forward movement that's just ready to unfold right there. And so it enables me as a therapist, when I work this way, to go deeply into the experience of the moment and to look for that place where it's going to open, that place where it's going to be more than it is in this moment, the occurring that's going to be implying. It helps me to seek that, the particularity of the moment, and to find the the deeper resonance of words that will open that up and will show a direction for us. I thought about a metaphor for theory, but then I couldn't come up with a metaphor. I came up with two metaphors, and then I thought, oh, but they don't really say it. So then I had a third metaphor. So I'm going to tell you the three metaphors, and I can say some things about theory there. And notice how each metaphor says something about what I'm trying to talk about, and then it fails to say something. That's also like theory, that it says something about human experience, and it fails. And that failure of it saying something is also important, because that leads me to the next metaphor. So let's start with the metaphor of a map. Theory is like a map, because it shows me something about what Jean would call the implicit intricacy. It shows things that I would never think to look for. And when I read about them, I think, oh yes, that is something I know about. It does work like that. Yes, I see. I'll use a theory of Bernie Brancheff's, who is a psychoanalytic theorist, who talks about what he calls as pathological structures of accommodation. I'm just using him a little bit arbitrary here to get a particular theory aside from Jean's theory. And he talks about how many people, and maybe this is all people in some way, are almost from birth, from the earliest experience, accommodating to the needs of the parent or the surround. And this accommodation is so almost instinctive, almost on the cellular level, that the person can hardly know what would be their own desire that isn't accommodating to the other. And when I read that originally of Bernie Brancheff, I thought, oh yeah, that's I know that experience for myself, and I know many people who have that experience, but it isn't exactly like that. And then I could go a little further with how it isn't exactly like that, but then it's a little bit more like that. But this starts a train of thinking about the kind of human experience that he's talking about that can evoke something. I want to say that theory is evocative. For me, the use of theory is that it's evocative. And it's that evocative nature of it that brings more, that opens things up. A map can help me to feel secure and located. And in a particularly difficult interaction with a client, if I have a map or several maps, many maps, I'm going to feel like I have my feet on the ground, just like when I go to a foreign city and I have a number of maps with me. I always feel better. I always say, well, you know, this must be over here somewhere, and I could get back to here. But the use of a map, one thing that's very important about a map is that you have to know how to use it, and you have to know how not to use it. The map is never the territory. So the map will never tell me about the friend that I meet on the street that's going to give me a lift in their car, or it's not going to tell me about the shop where I get lost and and spend all afternoon, or it's not going to tell me about the robber that's waiting for me in the deserted street corner. The map can tell me very general things, but never specifically and particularly about the experience. And the kind of theory that we would call, that I'm calling dead theory, which is really the dead use of theory, is when we confuse the map with the territory and we say, oh, you must be here because my map says so. So of course you are this. You are a borderline, or you're a this. And we have to do this in this therapy. When we impose the map onto the client, that can be a terrible use of theory, worse than dead. Because if it's dead, it's sort of, well, I don't know if it's worse than dead, but it's pretty bad. Okay, so the idea of a map, how am I doing on time? How much time do I have?
When are you supposed to stop?
I think I have about 10 more minutes in my calculation. The trouble with the metaphor of a map is that a map is a thing. It's a static thing out there. And theory is not a static thing out there, a live theory. A map doesn't take me or my client into consideration. It's just there. And so a live theory is not like a map. So then I thought, well, theory is like a good mother, because a good mother is something personal that I have an intimate relationship with. A good mother would be somebody that I feel a good mother inside me holds me in the situation, a kind of guiding wisdom, a sense of not being left to my own devices. And that intimate relationship with theory is very important, and the feeling of being held and the feeling of guidance is very important. So we might say that theory is like a good mother. Also, I would say that we choose our theories and we don't. That there's some way that some theories, it's almost like the theory chooses you. Many of you feel that way about the theory that comes out of the philosophy of the implicit, almost like it chose you. And there's a kind of kinship there. There's a feeling of recognition, as if you're recognizing something that's a part of your own biology somehow. And we can choose not to use certain theories, although sometimes I choose not to use certain theories and then I find my client is using that theory anyway. It's very interesting. What the client is saying is coming right out of a theory that I don't like. And I'll say, oh, well, it couldn't be that. And then the client will go on and it will turn, oh, it's like that. And saying it just the way this theory is that I don't like. And then I could see how the theory I don't like actually does do something good and does work when I follow that from the client. Anyway, so the mother is a theory that we use, that we have a sense of kinship and a sense of recognition. Many of you have read, and I'm including all kinds of narrative in my definition of theory, including fictional narrative. All of you know the experience of reading something or hearing something and saying, oh, yes, that's exactly right and true. And that has been true, and I've never had words for that until this has said that. And I thought I was alone. I thought I was the only one. Maybe I thought years ago, I'm the only one with these pathological, well, of course I didn't have that term for it, structures of accommodation. I'm the only one that feels like it's in the cells of my being to somehow accommodate. And then I read this theory and I say, oh, wow, there's even a whole theory about this. I guess I'm not so weird after all. I guess I'm not alone. And that's part of the feeling, in a way, of that intimate connection. A good mother is also someone that holds us firmly, but very lightly, always ready to let the child go and grow beyond where the mother is. And I think that that's very characteristic of a good theory, that we hold the theory lightly and the theory holds us lightly. There isn't a sense of having to be loyal to that theory or obey that theory, but that we can grow beyond it. There's a sense of the surprise of something new always, that we never come to the end of, oh, this is where the theory stops, but we can carry it forward just like we carry generations forward. But the metaphor of a good mother also falls short, because I don't want to say that it's hierarchical in that way. I'd like to say that my theory and I are equal. And also, one theory isn't enough. Sometimes one mother isn't enough also. You need many mothers. But we think of one mother. And so in that sense, I think the metaphor of a mother kind of falls short. Then I thought of the metaphor of a friend. But before I get to that, let me just say a little bit about a bad relationship with a mother. I don't want to say a bad theory or a bad mother. I don't know if there are bad theories or bad mothers. I don't know. My theory doesn't tell me that. I don't know about that. But I know there are bad relationships or bad aspects of relationship with a parent. One of the difficult aspects of relationship with a parent is the sense that the parent is expecting you and requiring you to be a certain way. And that's a very bad relationship with theory, when you feel like it's requiring you to be a certain way, to do a certain thing. And I have that often with my students and supervisees, that bad relationship with theory as a parent. And the sense of the know-it-allness of a bad relationship with a parent. Nothing says it all, and no one says it all. And we always want to know the more than that can be said. And in a good relationship with a parent, you have that, well, what's the more than my parents can say or give me here? Okay, but now let's look at the metaphor of a friend. I like that metaphor because I go into a therapy session with all of the theories that I have studied and I'm excited about and I'm interested in, and they're like friends that are coming into the session with me. And of course the client also has their theories and ideas and concepts. And those friends I can call upon in a kind of moment of confusion or stuckness, and those friends can sort of bail me out or can add something new that I haven't thought of. Oh, I wanted to, before I say that, I wanted to also talk about what Lainey said to me. Where is Lainey? There she is. Okay. About needing to be, this is in relation to a bad a bad relationship with a parent. Okay. That in that bad relationship, we need to release ourselves from this kind of investment or attachment. And we can do that by just putting the idea or the theory aside and seeing what's there beside it, and seeing what comes new that we didn't expect. But a theory that is with us as a friend is also a kind of spirit to it, a sense of this helping us in a moment. Do I have time for a quick example? Or, I think I have 1 minute. I'm going to give you a quick example. My client has always been very responsible and doing things for other people. She's one of these, that's why I thought of Bernie Brancheff. She's one of those people who's been very accommodating in her life. And she decided to quit her job without having another job and was very worried about doing that. And then all these other jobs have wanted her. And then she has this time, and she was going to go on a trip, and she was going to do these things that she's never done. Everything was wonderfully happening for her with this change. And she came into her session so anxious, she could hardly stand it. And she was saying, I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't understand this. I'm supposed to, she told me all of these things, and then she said, I'm supposed to drive out to Long Island for this vacation, and I'm somebody that doesn't drive. And when she said that, I sort of thought of Bernie Brancheff, and I thought of, oh, this is so new for her to be this way rather than the way she's used to being. And I said to her, oh, you don't recognize this woman. It's a new person. And she said, yes. But I said, well, it's more than that. And she said, I feel so disconnected. I feel so alone, even though all these wonderful things are happening. And I said, it's as if you've refused the job here, and now you're alone. And she said, I've been everything to everybody, and if I'm not, then I feel like I'm nothing to anybody. And we just sat with that for a minute. And then she thought of this story that came to her in which a little girl was taught about the vast world of philosophy by somebody who was showing it to her. And she was saying, this is what I need, the feeling of somebody showing this big world to me and not being alone. And I wanted to bring that, that example of theory because theory helped me sort of get a sense of, oh, well, this configuration may be at hand. But then she had a different, the part of it that was important to her was this disconnection. And then that opened out to this whole idea of what she needed. So I'm going to stop with that example. And then we're going to have questions and answers and sort of pull this together. Do we have Jean here? Are we ready for the next part of our discussion?